Hi there, students. I'm XS. That's little x, little s, which stands for extra sweet, because that's what I am. For today's grammar drop, I want to teach you a handy little verbal affix that allows you to say that you want to do some verb. There are rather a lot of verb affixes in Japanese that generally will get put at the end of a verb and give your verb just a little bit more depth and quality. They'll let you express that verb within your sentence in a way that adds just a little bit more information than the verb by itself would normally express. Many of these verbal affixes, including the tie form that we're going to learn today, are generally going to need to attach to the stem form of the verb. That's handy and convenient because for the most part, so long as we know how to form the stem of the verb, adding a suffix like tie is mostly just a matter of just sticking it right on the end. As I've said before, the Japanese language has a tendency towards being somewhat plug and play, so it's easy in that way. Let's start with a quick example sentence. Kawaii eiga o mitai. This is a relatively simple sentence. I want to break this sentence down for you, but before I break it down part by part, I want you to see the bones of what this sentence looks like. I think sometimes it's important to see how something is working within the Japanese language over what specifically is happening. Grammar is important because the grammatical rules within a language are kind of like physics in the natural world. You throw something up in the air, it falls down. Why? Laws of gravity. Languages adhere to rules in a similar way, and one of the things that actually makes Japanese grammar digestible, I can't bring myself to say easy because it's not easy, but at least it's moderately predictable. So, in the Japanese language, we have an adjective modifying a noun, and that's what we see here, right? So we have adjective modifying noun, and together they form a single unit, kawaii eiga. We've marked that noun with o as our object marker. Then we have the verb. Note what's missing, I. We've seen that before. Japanese likes to omit the first person pronoun, but that's actually going to be even more important in this case for something later. So please take note of the fact that our I pronoun is missing from the front of our sentence, and just hold that in your mind for later. Now, as I promised, let's really carefully dissect this sentence. First, we have the adjective kawaii. It describes some noun as scary. Next, we have our noun, the same noun that's being modified by kawaii. In fact, once we have kawaii and eiga together, they kind of form one simple nominal unit, right? It's one noun. It's a kawaii eiga. Eiga is a noun that means movie. It's quite literally projection image if we analyze those kanji carefully. But once they're stuck together, kawaii eiga means scary movie. One noun, scary movie. The particle in this sentence, the only particle that we see at least, is o. In this case, o is marking kawaii eiga as the object unit for this sentence. It's the thing that is being watched or seen. And finally, we have our verb. The base verb to see in Japanese is miru. In this case, miru is in the tie form to indicate a desire to do this specific verb, right? So, mitai, I want to see. So here's our sentence all together. We've elided the first person pronoun, it's not there, but it's still being implied within the sentence. So the meaning is like, I, a scary movie, want to see. Altogether, I want to see a scary movie. Watashi wa kawaii eiga o mitai. But we don't need watashi wa, so our sentence is really just kawaii eiga o mitai. ですね? Okay, as I've indicated before, in order to use this desire to do verb form, we're going to need to add it as a suffix to our verbal stem. Finding the stem is considerably easier when our verb happens to be an ichidan verb. For all ichidan verbs, all that you need to do is drop the ru, and you're already at the stem form. Let's quickly look at a handful of examples. So we've got taberu, meaning to eat. So the verbal stem will be taberu without ru, which is just tabe, to eat. Then we have kanjiru, which means to feel something or to sense something. And the stem is just going to be kanji. Don't get it confused with kanji like the writing system. This is kanjiru without the ru as the stem form. Okay? And also, I should note that you can't just use the stem form. The stem form has to take something. So kanji from kanjiru is waiting for something. And that something we're going to see in a second is going to be that tai. Okay? And lastly, we have the verb kiru, which means to wear. Specifically, kiru means to wear something on your body, like a shirt or a kimono. But the verbal stem will be the simple ki. In all three of these cases, just like we saw with miru, in order to form the stem, you're simply dropping the ru. Once you have the stem, it's going to be really easy to form the tai, desire to do construction. See, it's pretty easy. Tabe plus tai becomes tabetai, to want to eat, as in the sentence, sushi o tabetai. Kanji becomes kanjitai, to want to feel, as in, kimi o ushigawa kara kanjitai. And to want to wear is going to be kitai, as in, ano kimono o kitai. I want to wear that kimono. So finding the stem form for ichidan verbs is easy, then finding the stem form for godan verbs is only just slightly more complicated, and only because we really need to have our verb end in an e sound before it can take that tai suffix. There are two ways that you can think about this, two approaches that you can take, and both of them are going to get us to the same result. First, you can think about just converting the u sound at the end of any verb to an e sound for godan verbs specifically, and then boom, we've got the stem. But the other way that you can think about it, which feels like extra steps, but for me has just always been the way that I tend to think about it, is to take the mas form and drop mas to arrive at the stem. So here we have our verbs. We have imas, and we're dropping the mas to make e, which means to say. We have ikimas, and we're dropping the mas to create iki, and that means to go. And we have hanashimasu, and we're dropping the mas to make hanashi, which means to talk. The trick to this is that you have to already know the mas form, otherwise you're really just forming the stem before you add mas and then you're dropping the mas. But if you're anything like me, the mas form might be more common in your day-to-day speech. So forming the stem might actually be easier if you're just thinking about dropping the mas rather than thinking about converting the u form from the plain form to an e verb ending. Really, it's whatever makes the most sense to you. Anyway, however we've gotten there, now that we have the verbal stem for these godan verbs, we can add our suffix to create this tai form, which means to want to do that verb. So we're starting with the verbal stem e, and we're adding tai to make e tai, and that means to want to say. We're starting with the verbal stem iki, and we're adding tai to make iki tai, to want to go. And hanashi plus tai makes hanashi tai, which means to want to talk. So with these tai form verbs, we can make new phrases like nanka o iitai, I want to say something. Nihon e ikitai, I want to go to Japan. Or tomodachi to hanashitai, I want to talk with my friends. Not so difficult, right? What about our two irregular verbs, suru and kuru? Well, they are fairly easy too, especially if you know their mas forms. So, suru, or shimas, is going to become shitai, to want to do. Kuru, or kimas, is going to become kitai, to want to come. This is another one of those cases where suru and kuru follow the same rules and are fairly easy to handle. Suru becomes shimasu, and then you can drop the mas and create a shitai, which means to want to do. Kuru becomes kimasu, and then you can drop mas to create kitai in the tai form, to want to come. At this point, you're probably wondering why suru and kuru are even considered irregular verbs when they seem so well behaved. We've looked at situations where we can create the tai form for ichidan verbs, for godan verbs, and for our two irregular verbs. Unfortunately, everything that we've learned so far is the plain form of that tai construction. It's the form that you would use when you're telling your friends and your buddies what it is that you want to do. Well, we're also going to need to know how to form the polite form of these verbal compounds, aren't we? So, we're going to have to learn that now. For all verbs, whether ichidan verbs, godan verbs, or irregular verbs, once you've found the tai form, in order to form the polite form, just add des. Ikitai desu. I want to go, polite. Tabetai desu. I want to eat, polite. Halloween party ni kitai desu. I want to come to the Halloween party, polite. That's it. That's all you need to do to create the polite form of this tai construction. Super easy, right? Super straightforward. We're almost done here. There's one more thing that I need to address. Remember when I asked you to remember that the first person pronoun was elated in this sentence, that we dropped the first person pronoun in our sentence, kawaii eiga o mitai? I've told you before that Japanese often likes to drop the first person pronoun if it can be implied, right? If we can tell that I'm the one speaking or I'm the one doing, then we don't necessarily need to say, I do these things. So, for a lot of sentences, if it makes sense that you're talking about yourself, you don't need to add watashi wa or boku wa or whatever other personal pronoun you're using for yourself to the beginning of those sentences because it's already obvious that you're talking about yourself. However, in this case, that's even more explicit because in this sentence, kawaii eiga o mitai, you could only be talking about yourself. Why? This tai form that we've been learning today sort of specifically refers to one's own desires. It would be considered a bit rude to insinuate that you know what another person wants to do. And so we're going to use the tai form to talk about things that we ourselves want to do. I want to do this verb, but we're actually going to use another construction, tagaru, to infer when we think we know what someone else wants to do. You're going to need some kind of background knowledge in order to make that claim, but in that case, you can use a different construction. You just wouldn't use the tai form for somebody else. We're going to look at that tagaru construction another time, but for now, I think we've covered everything for the tai form. So, I'll see you next week. Mata laishu.